Hey, sweet listeners. Thanks for tuning in to the NetSuite podcast. I'm your host, Kendall Fisher, and today we're discussing a subject that's top of mind for a lot of businesses right now, the 2021 holiday season. To dive into this important topic, we'll be joined by expert Allison Auclair, NetSuite's Vice President of Product Management, as well as Drew Cook, the CFO and Head of Operations for Pact, Earth's favorite clothing company. Auclair will kick things off by reviewing some of the trends and insights we gained from the 2020 holiday season and how that's evolved over the past year, especially amid labor shortages and transportation challenges. She provides advice for navigating all of that, as well as how to prepare for an increased utilization of omnichannel shopping like buy online, pick up in store, ship from store, ship to store, returns, and more. Then Pact CFO and Head of Operations Drew Cook will join us to give some real-life insight into what the company faced during the 2020 holiday season, including manufacturing delays and a lack of inventory, and how they're using those lessons to inform their strategy this year. Cook explains how he uses NetSuite to make informed decisions and adapt quickly to the changing business environment, including navigating supply chain disruptions, customer acquisition costs, and consumer trends. I know those probably sound familiar to all of you tuning in, so listen up because he has some advice around that. And he also advises all businesses to figure out a direct-to-consumer strategy, why it's beneficial, and how to stand out amid the competition. That's all coming up next, so stay tuned.
You're listening to the NetSuite podcast, where we discuss what's happening within NetSuite, why we're doing it, and where we're heading in the future. We'll dive into the details about the software and the people at NetSuite who are behind all the moving parts. We'll also feature customer growth stories, discussing the ups and downs of running a company and how one integrated system can help your business continue to scale.
First up, NetSuite's Vice President of Product Management, Allison Auclair, will join us to discuss holiday preparation, the lessons learned from 2020, and what to expect this year. Hi, Allison. Welcome back to the NetSuite podcast.
Thanks, Kendall. It's great to be here.
You actually previously joined us on this podcast, episode number 48 from August 2020 for our viewers or for our listeners who may want to go back and check it out. But during that, we actually talked about preparing for the 2020 holiday season. First and foremost, why do we have these conversations around this time of year right now? Why do businesses need to start preparing for the holidays, during this time?
Well, it's super important to be ready. And this year is no exception. You're still in the midst of a pandemic. It's really important to plan ahead so that if you think of things that you need to think about or do a little bit differently, you have time to adapt before holiday.
So when we chatted last time, we discussed the impact of COVID-19 on supply chains, as well as consumer trends and some of the pain points distributors, retailers, and manufacturers would likely face during last year's holiday season. What actually ended up happening? What trends and insights do we have from the 2020 holiday season?
Well, we definitely saw those supply chain disruptions happen. If you look at what happened last year, we had factory shutdowns due to people testing positive for COVID. So we had shortages in labor. And on top of that, because some other factories shut down, we had shortages in raw materials. So we definitely saw a more constrained supply and the impact of labor shortages overall. So we didn't always get what we wanted last year. And we definitely saw that there was a huge spike in e-commerce shopping that was not unexpected, but that did come to fruition. We saw the spike actually around the shutdown time, and it continued all the way through holiday. So a huge shift from shopping in person to more shopping in e-commerce.
So I'm curious how that's evolved then over the past year. Let's start on the supply chain side of things. How has the situation with supply chains changed for better or for worse since last holiday season?
Well, we expect it's going to be the same this year, maybe even worse. So if you look at what's happening recently, we have definitely see that we have still the problem of factories having sort of mini shutdowns. There's a new normal. We've kind of figured out how to operate in the world of the pandemic, but there are still cases where somebody tests positive disruptions happen just in terms of production. But the big news this year is that we have huge transportation challenges, even more so than last year. So some of the viewers may have seen that there were reports of the third largest shipping port that's south of Shanghai. It's been shut down since August 11th. So that's having a huge impact on goods getting positioned where they need to be for holiday. And so that there's that partial closure. There was another port that closed just prior to that. And then we still have lingering effects from the shutdown of that tanker being stuck in the Suez Canal back in March. So it's like a set of dominoes that's really setting us up for very challenging transportation this year around that's even worse.
So then how can businesses navigate all of this? How do they prepare? The disruptions are here. So like, how do they prepare for this holiday season? How do they prepare to take on even more disruptions should they come?
Yeah. So of course, have a plan is key, but also be ready to adapt when things change. So if you see those types of situations that you've got a labor shortage and you're trying to figure out what to do, think about that in advance. Like what is going to be your plan A? What's going to be your plan B? It's super important to try to think through that as best you can. Same thing for transportation, for production. It's really important that you, based on the best knowledge that you have right now, that you think about what your plan is. We also have seen that there's a lot higher shipping costs this year. So one of the things you may want to also think about is any price adjustments that need to be made. We definitely are seeing a lot of merchants pass those additional shipping costs on to customers. So something to think about in advance, but then be ready to change, right? Mm-hmm. Be ready to respond when that disruption happens, when you get new information, something's going to be later than you thought of. What is going to be your plan? How do you proactively then communicate those changes to customers? And there may be a silver lining in all this that for people who are sourcing onshore, you might be able to capture a little bit more of the market because you have that product ready to go. So different things to consider.
So are there specific steps businesses can take to really mitigate these risks? Like, is there anything that you would recommend that they can, put into effect right now as we're looking ahead?
Yeah, so I would certainly think about considering the supply allocation capabilities if you haven't already implemented those, because those will help you respond when you get a disruption. So the supply allocation, which came out a few releases ago, gives you options. Basically, you configure your priorities, and then it gives you some options to execute on those when a disruption happens. And so if you haven't already looked at that, I would definitely look at that in advance as a tool in your bag to help you adapt.
What other ways does NetSuite help businesses kind of, pivot on demand if needed when disruptions occur?
Yeah, so the supply allocation is a big part of it, but communication is also a really important part of it. So knowing that you have sort of service plans in place and that you have the communication channels open and configured within NetSuite so you can communicate out to your customers when that plan takes place. Communication is key. People know that things happen, particularly now, but being able to tell them what's going on, it really helps.
Yeah. And what about consumer trends? What changes did we see in shopping behavior or, popular product categories last holiday season? And what should we expect this year?
As I mentioned in the introduction, we saw a huge shift to e-commerce last year that started not even just with holiday, but even before holiday when things shut down. And I think one of the things we'll see this year is that shift is here to stay. So people should expect higher than previous years e-commerce as a component of the holiday strategy. But at the same time, because when we shifted to e-commerce and then stores started to reopen again, we saw that driving also an increased utilization of omnichannel shopping. People wanted to do buy online, pick up in store, wanted to ship it to home if it wasn't available in the store, ship to store. And we saw merchants trying to deal with all that complexity and do things like shipping from store to try to make the best use of their inventory that they can. So we expect that all of these things are going to be as important, if not more important this year as we continue to deal with our new normal.
Did you change your shopping habits at all? Just curious.
I did. And I'm full-time working mom of two. And so I was already inclined to this omnichannel shopping thing.
Yeah.
However, I would say even more so, especially delivery. I changed a lot my behavior around delivery and wanting to get more things delivered, and more places let me get delivery. And so I'm now hooked. I love getting delivery.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was never a shop online person. That just wasn't I love trying things on. That was my go-to. But, over the past year, I really have become an online shopper. And then my favorite thing now is like, I've gotten down the return process, being able to just ship my return back in the box with the shipping label that it's sent to me in. Like I was never that person before. I would always like, oh no, if I'm going to make a return, I'm just going to go in store. Now I've even got I'm going to mail back this return process down, which I never thought I'd be that person, but here we are in 2021.
All about the convenience. All about
exactly. I can just drop it off at my corner FedEx. Yes, please. But how difficult would it be to navigate all of this on the fly and really be able to kind of transform or change your operations in real time? Like, in other words, why is it critical to consider these things now, even if, trends change, come the holiday season?
And it takes a little bit of time to adapt. So it's important to think in advance. But the good thing is with NetSuite, it's really easy to configure and turn things on and off so that you can adjust. So if you haven't made omnichannel shopping experiences available, the capabilities are all there. You just need to turn them on. If in the middle of all this, let's say stores shut down again and you can't have people walk in, but you could do curbside pickup or you could ship from your store, you can actually just turn this on, turn this off, shift more volume over here. And so it gives you a different level of agility, but you need to start exploring it now because it takes a little time to understand it, set it up, have it ready so that you have that agility to pivot at that moment when you need to.
Right. You and I were chatting about a customer, Henry something, what was it that was able to kind of do this last holiday season, a toy manufacturer, right?
Yeah, Henry Bears Park. They're actually a local toy retailer in my area. They have a number of stores, and one of them happens to be in the town next to mine, so I go there frequently. And they had set up buy online, pick up in store, and then things shut down, right? Stores had to shut down. And so they said, okay, well, we can't do that anymore. So we're going to turn that off. And then the regulations changed and they could do curbside pickup, but they couldn't have people go in the store. So they were able to then turn that back on and direct some of that traffic and fulfill out of their store and utilize that inventory. Then things opened up again and they were able to resume the full store pickup experience of people going into the store. So just by the fact that they had that set up, and they had that flexibility of, hey, it's there. I can just turn it on, turn it off, adjust it the way I need to, really help them to pivot and adapt in the face of this crazy world that we're living in.
Absolutely. And speaking of, as more consumers are choosing online ordering, not only for the holiday season, but as you said, always, it's continued to go to increase, but 2020 really kind of accelerated that. How can businesses optimize their e-commerce platforms for their customers?
I think as we talked about, this omni-channel shopping is here to stay. So it's key to keep optimizing for it. So many of us or many merchants may have started to dip their toes in those waters during the pandemic, but it's important to keep thinking about how does that evolve? So for example, you may have started with a buy online, pick up in store, but how can you further blend the physical and the digital experience? What's it like when somebody's in your store and they're maybe shopping online while they're in your store at the same time? How do you blend and merge those experiences so that they become one into that end consumer? It just is natural that it all works together and it's one experience, not two different experiences. So thinking about that and expanding options. If you didn't do ship from store, you might want to think about that as an option. And maybe you did buy online, pick up in store, but you didn't do like a save the sale yet, where you can look up inventory in another store and ship it to them if it's not in stock. So thinking about all of the different options and how you might want to evolve that for this year.
Do you think the actual meaning of omnichannel has changed at all since the pandemic, or is it more kind of like just the expectations have changed?
I don't think the meaning itself changed, but the adoption has accelerated considerably faster than what we thought it would. So because there was such a strong push to ship to e-commerce, and because all these constraints of what we could and couldn't do, meant that we had to think about alternate fulfillment options, the adoption was much faster. And now that people have a taste of it, they want it still, right? Like we were talking about, I got delivery. I want delivery for everything now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and not even just the basics, right? It's not even just like, I want delivery or I want, buy online, pick up in store. It's also, I want to be able to, buy in store and return whatever way, or I want to be able to buy online and then, do curbside returns. There's so many different kind of variations of shopping. And I think we're going to see even more of that post-holiday season, right? When it comes to actual returns and how people are going about that time.
Absolutely. If you think we'll be in the middle of the winter, like that's a time when, it's possible we've got more cases, that more people are sick and they want to be able to still engage, but they don't want to go into the store. So we have to have all those options ready and be able to meet the customers where they want to be. One
of my favorite new things is I'm actually an avid Rent the Runway user. So I instead of shopping, basically I get a shipment of 4 items every 2 weeks. And one of the things that I love that they're doing right now is they're doing where I just leave my my returns. I leave them on my front porch and they have a process where somebody comes and picks them up for me. So they already had made it easy. I could go to FedEx, I could return at my local Nordstrom, I could do all of that. But now somebody will literally get my package from my doorstep and return it for me, which is the ultimate lazy. I don't actually end up doing that very often because I feel bad, but it is an interesting, I'm like, wow, we are getting real creative in this whole process.
Yeah. But if you're a working mom with 2 kids who can't get out to drop it at FedEx, that's where I need to be.
There we go, Allison. And you see, this is why we need diversity of thought, because I'm sitting here like I'm just a single person with a dog. So that I love that. I love that. So, I kind of want to bring this to us now. And while maybe especially B2C companies aren't necessarily looking to implement a new system right now in the middle of all of this, as they look to their, busiest next 3 months of the year. I do want to help businesses who will be thinking ahead and maybe come January, February, who will be thinking about how they can make their processes better, and how they really deliver the ultimate omnichannel experience. So how does NetSuite help with this, not only during the holidays, but at all times?
I think that's a great question. And there are 2 sort of key sort of tenets underneath NetSuite that I think are key to creating that omnichannel experience. The first one is having a single unified experience. So if you have capabilities, and no matter where the customer interacts with you, they get the right information, they get the same information, they don't see those fracture points in the customer experience, that is key. So the fact that you can have a unified system that has all of your operational capabilities and financials, and then use that in any channel you want, whether it's e-commerce or in-store or your CRM, that delivers a different level of service to customers that gives them a truly seamless, frictionless experience. And the other aspect is agility. So we talked about the example of having to pivot earlier. When you can make a change in one place in NetSuite, and then it's reflected in all of your channels and all the different ways that you interact with customers, that is huge. That gives you an ability to pivot much faster and create the type of experience responding to these changes, both in supply chain and in the market demands, to make that experience that your customers want.
Can you give me an example of like a way in which like agility plays a role? Like, let's just talk about inventory. Let's talk about returns. Somebody comes in with a return. What's a way that agility could help, increase profitability, or at least, help on the profitability side for a business?
Yeah, this is multiple aspects to that. One is return policy. Let's say you need to pivot and change your return policy. Well, if you have different systems that you're trying to put together to do that, you've got to make that change in multiple places, make sure it actually works, test it you may not be able to implement the same policy everywhere based on the constraints of those different systems you're putting together. So contrast that with, I can make the change in one place. It's available online, it's available in store, it's available in my warehouse. All the policies are enforced. That gives you the ability to make that change you need. For example, a shorter or longer return policy to either optimize for customer service or optimize for profitability. You also then want to get your money from that item that was returned. So being able to have an efficient process to then turn that around and say, I'm going to resell this, and I don't need to just, depend on an open box shelf in the store to move this item, or a markdown in store because this came back late. When you can open that world up and say, I can sell it not only in that store, but to anyone online and in any other store, you create a way to move that inventory and get the most profit out of it that you can. That's difficult to achieve when things are disconnected.
Absolutely. Great example there. Can't believe it, but we're already wrapping up here. Anything else you'd want to share, Allison?
I think the general sentiment is just like, don't panic, be prepared, but you still have time, right? Yes, we're coming up on holiday, but there's still a chance to optimize your processes, to optimize what you're doing in NetSuite. And, we're here to support you. And so, please, reach out if you've got concerns. We're here and we have your back.
Right. And if you're a prospect, tuning in, you haven't implemented NetSuite or gone the NetSuite route thus far, listen to this, think about what you can do better next year, and give us a ring come January or February.
Absolutely.
Allison, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. It was great to be here.
Does your business have trouble managing inventory, projects, or even getting paid on time? Don't let spreadsheets and QuickBooks hold you back. If you want to get your business to a better place, take action now and make the move to NetSuite. Stop paying for multiple systems that don't give you the information you need when you need it. Ditch the spreadsheets and all the old software you've outgrown. Now is the time to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. NetSuite gives you visibility and control over your financials, HR, inventory, e-commerce, and more. Everything you need, all in one place, instantaneously. Whether you're doing $1 million or hundreds of millions in revenue, save time and money with NetSuite.
Join the over 24,000 companies using NetSuite right now. Let NetSuite show you how they'll benefit your business with a free product tour at netsuite.com/business. Schedule your free product tour right now at netsuite.com/business. netsuite.com/business.
Now we'll hear from Drew Cook, the CFO and head of operations for Pact, the leading brand in sustainable and organic clothing and home goods. Hi, Drew. Welcome to the NetSuite podcast.
Kendall, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we are excited to dive in. I gave our listeners a little bit of insight into the company in the introduction of this episode, but in your own words, what is Pact?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Pact is on a mission to create Earth's favorite clothing. And the way we do that is we make all our products using GOTS certified organic cotton, and all of our products are made in fair trade factories. And so we produce primarily women's products. About 75% of our sales are women's products. And we're sold mostly through our own website, which is wearpact.com. And then we also have a wholesale presence. We're sold nationally in Whole Foods Market, the grocery store. And so, Pact is a part of a larger movement within apparel to try to be more sustainable and environmentally conscious. And we think we're really kind of on the forefront of that with our certifications and how comprehensive it is within our product portfolio. So we're not just a collection of organic or fair trade products. It's really it really covers everything we make. And so we think personally, I think we do it the best, and I think we're the most truthful about our sustainability. But we're excited to see that there are more people thinking about it, and hopefully consumers making purchase decisions to try to reflect those values.
Now, when you say products, you say, you're 75% women's products. What are we talking here? Are we talking t-shirts, loungewear? What do you guys sell?
Yeah. So what we consider basic. So the company was founded as an underwear business. That's still our bread and butter. But we've found a lot of success branching into other products. Our leggings are, I haven't worn them personally, but from everything we hear from our customers, they're amazing. We also make t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies, joggers. And so it's pretty comprehensive now, but very kind of specifically within the basic casual comfort space.
Absolutely. So then I'm curious, how did the events of last year impact business? I know for one, I lived in sweats and purchased sweat outfits, too many, way too many to name, but with all of us with many people, I should say, going kind of the work from home route, and then with more and more businesses having this kind of hybrid workforce. What did you see in 2020?
Yeah, I would split the impact into two different components. I think the first is the demand trends we saw from our consumers, which, like you said, I think you were not alone in looking for a more casual, comfortable wardrobe, given that a lot of people were not leaving the house too much. And so our e-commerce business really saw some strong growth. I think importantly, it was a time for consumers who had previously been skeptical of e-commerce to, in some ways, they were forced to try it. And I think consumers a lot of them realize how great the experience is. It's so easy. You don't have to go to a crowded mall, look for parking. You can really shop from the comfort of your home. And now with kind of the market expectations around ease of returns, I think a lot of the downside risk for consumers was hopefully mitigated and addressed. And so for us, the e-commerce business performed really well. We saw significant growth. Our Whole Foods business, I think we were fortunate that our wholesale business was in a place that didn't really close. I think brands that were in department stores or other types of brick and mortar locations that had to physically close probably struggled a little bit more. But again, it's a small piece of our business, but we were fortunate to be in a grocery environment where there was still some traffic at least.
Absolutely.
And then so the demand side was great. Supply side was really challenging.
Yeah.
And so as you can expect, we faced factory delays, and all of our products are made in certified organic and fair trade factories in India. And India's obviously had a pretty rough go with COVID. I think they're starting to bounce back a little bit, but our first and foremost concern is the safety of our consumers, but also our factory partners. And so, we did not cancel any purchase orders. We encouraged them to do what they needed to, even if that meant fully closing, to make sure their workers stayed safe. But it did definitely impact our business. And so we went through times where we were largely out of product and didn't have much to sell to our consumers who were really kind of hungry for it. And so that piece was really tough. And the freight component, securing space on vessels, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more today, but the supply side overall was very challenging. And we definitely were at some all-time lows for inventory levels, just given that demand was sky high and supply was pretty hard.
Well, so how did you navigate that? I mean, we had Allison Auclair on before this, our in-house expert on all things commerce. But we were talking, about how businesses need to be more communicative with customers than ever before, especially with some of these shortages and delays. So what did you guys do? How did you navigate, a shortage of inventory and delays on the manufacturing side and so forth?
Yeah, we were really making decisions in real time last year. Nobody planned for the impact that COVID had. I don't think anybody could have foreseen how long it would have lasted.
No.
And so we were really looking at making decisions kind of as they came. And so what we did is we tried to we value transparency with our consumers, whether it's about how our products are made or what the status of our products are. And so we told them, we make products in fair trade factories in India. We can't force them to get up to speed and work and try to crank out products when it's not good for their health. And so I think our consumers were receptive to that. I also think there was just an overall level of understanding from consumers last year, given the disruption about what that meant. So we didn't necessarily nail every season. So our fall products that should have launched in August or September, we're launching in October, November. And I think the good news is that consumers still kind of had the demand for it, but we did our best to take the information we had today and just make the best decisions possible. I don't necessarily think we nailed it, but I do think we were given a little bit of leeway from our consumers.
I'm not sure that anyone nailed it. So I think no one expected, like you said, no one expected how long it was going to last. No one expected, the backups in ports like we're seeing now. I don't think anyone expected the impact that Delta was going to have, like it's having this year. And we'll get into that in a second. But So going back to 2020, you just said like you were delayed your fall shipment, your fall inventory wasn't coming in until October, November. So what did you do to prepare for the 2020 holiday season? It's usually for any, retailer, it's usually the biggest time of the year. So what did you expect and how did you plan around that? What steps did you take to really mitigate risk?
Yeah, I think the biggest risk we had was the timing of when product was coming in. And so if you
Mhm.
get, a pair of Santa pajamas that lands at your warehouse on December 26th, you're in a
Yeah.
little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
And so we tried to prioritize shipments that had highly seasonal products in them to get them in time for the kind of key seasonal period. And some of our basics like underwear or leggings, which are a little bit more year round, they have less seasonal nature. We would deprioritize those with our factories because we knew that we could probably sell those in January or February if we had to.
Mhm.
And so really kind of thinking about what can we control, where can we make priorities and kind of give our factories and our freight forward partners, where can we give them some of our key goals and how can we align those together to the point where we can hopefully get the right products at the right time.
Mhm.
And then I think, more tactically, because we had shortages, and we also didn't know how consumers were going to behave, right? We didn't know, are
Right.
people going to be traveling for the holidays? Have
Right.
people been sitting at home buying gifts much earlier in the year? Are people even doing gifts because of the economic uncertainty? And
Right.
so we really tried to be a little bit more cautious with expectations for that specific kind of 2 to 3 week period from, Thanksgiving, Black Friday through a week or so before Christmas. And so we tried not to put as much pressure on that time. We
Mhm.
pulled back a little bit on our digital marketing spend. We didn't go as deep on discounts just
Mhm.
because we didn't know what was going to happen. And, we didn't want to be over investing at a time where consumers might not be responding.
So I have a couple questions that stem for that. Number one, were you using any tools to help you kind of make this type of an analysis and help really guide those decisions?
Yeah, so I think we are very data driven,
Mhm.
and when managing inventory, we look at weeks on hand, and we are a NetSuite customer, and we a lot of our reporting and analysis comes directly out of NetSuite, and so
Mhm.
we're monitoring inventory real time. What is
Mhm.
selling, what is not selling, and how do we change either promotional activity or pricing strategy for those products? Because you really
Mhm.
have if you don't have that many products to sell, you really need to nail the ones you do
Yeah.
and make sure you're delivering sufficient margin to cover up the miss you may have from not having other products. And so, we rely heavily on the data that we get out of NetSuite, and then other things we're looking at what's happening within the industry. So, what are other
Right.
people doing? We don't think we're the smartest necessarily on any front, and so we take a lot of we're at least paying attention to what other brands are doing and how they're thinking about the holidays. And so I think looking sideways is really good. If we just focus on what we're doing, we can absolutely miss trends that are happening in the market, and we have to be aware of what our consumers are seeing, not just from us but from other brands.
Right, of course. When you say that you're really diving into the data and doing that type of analysis to see, which products are performing, which aren't, making changes, how often are you doing that?
Oh, at that point, it's daily, um,
Daily.
especially around like there's such a key selling period from Black Friday, Cyber Monday, those 4 days, and then typically it's 2 to 3 weeks after that, leading up to shipping cutoffs before Christmas.
Yeah.
And so during those periods, we are looking nonstop at the data
Got it.
and really trying to make sure our real time decisions are made as with as much information as possible.
Got it. So what actually ended up happening for the company in 2020 during the holiday season?
Yeah, we definitely we had a little bit of trouble meeting our projections for the fourth quarter specifically, just because of product shortages.
Right.
But what we saw is that because of the strategy and projections specifically from a revenue standpoint, I think the because we were discounting less, because we pulled back a little bit on marketing,
Mhm.
margin and profitability outperformed during that time period. But it set us up for just an all-time high in January. And
Yeah.
January is typically not a key sales period for us, just because or for a lot of other retailers, because you're coming off a holiday. People are honestly a little bit tired of shopping. And it's oftentimes you're competing with winter clearance sales. And so it's really kind of price led, which is not a great time to be making big bets. But having a lot of new product in January was clear that there was consumer interest and hunger for our products, and I think probably products more broadly in the market.
That's great. So how are you looking towards and planning for the 2021 holiday season? I mean, looking back at everything that went down in 2020, and obviously this is a different year, and things kind of feel somewhat normal, but then again, we have variants like Delta that are playing a big factor, and we still have ports that are backed up. So what are you expecting to see? Not just pain points, but also growth opportunities. Like, do you think January will be another big month for you?
Yeah, it's been interesting. And, we started making decisions for how we would manage 2021 at the end of 2020. So as soon as this stuff started to play through, we were thinking about, do we need to rethink our lead times and when we're placing our purchase orders? And so we've tried to increase the amount of buffer that we give our factories to get products out. Our factories have done a really good job getting caught back up. But as we mentioned, the new issue is freight. And so we've got several containers worth of products that are sitting in our factories in India right now, just waiting to find vessel space.
Right.
And so, our kind of big thing is, control what we can. And so if we are able to provide longer lead times, then, right now the feeling is it may not be because of a factory shutdown due to COVID, but we're probably going to need it for something else. And right now it's been freight. And so we've worked to try to do that, to give longer lead times. And we absolutely rethought what January could look like for us going forward. I think a lot of people hold to launch their spring products until February because January's typically been clearance, but we had some really interesting learnings last year. And I think you don't want to assume that anything that's happening right now is necessarily a new normal. So you can take half steps towards capitalizing on a situation like that without getting over your skis in terms of assuming January is going to be one of your biggest months every year from going forward. Because I'm not sure that's the case either.
Yeah, unless you're me. I always shop right after the holidays in January. That's like my biggest, I feel like I spend the most in January because I've shopped all year for other people leading up to Christmas. And then come January, I'm like, time to be selfish.
It's you time. Yeah. New year, new you. And you got to find some time for yourself. The holidays are, I think, rightfully so, a lot of times about others. And sometimes it's fun to put yourself first for a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. So what will you do differently than last year? And what will you do the same?
I think the biggest thing we did differently is try to provide lead times. And so, last year we absolutely missed the season for a lot of our products. And this year we said, okay, let's take a little bit of the cash or the capital hit up front to try to ensure that we don't miss that selling time period. And so even though we're facing some delays, mostly on the freight side now, we're looking at getting products in, early November that we would have expected to have in late September. And that's a lot better than, coming sometime after Christmas. And so that's probably the biggest thing we've done differently. On the digital marketing side, I think we're still interested to see how aggressive people are during the actual holiday sales period. So Black Friday through Cyber Monday, for example, because so much of the e-commerce, volume from the past 18 months stuck in terms of conversion of people from brick and mortar to online. So we think people may be doing their shopping earlier. And so you're not necessarily going to see as big of a spike around that key kind of holiday time period as people may have just bought a few weeks or a few months earlier. And so I think we're going to continue to be measured in terms of how we invest in digital marketing during that time.
Well, and how are you expecting, what are you planning to see in terms of customer expectations? We talked about earlier shopping online, making returns easier. What are you guys expecting to see?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's gotten so many different e-commerce experiences over the past 18 months. That I think consumers typically pick and choose brands that do things well, and then they expect everybody else to do all of those things. And so, like Amazon made shipping really fast. And so now everybody's expected to have 2-day shipping. But hey, Zappos did returns really well. They made returns so easy for everybody. And so now everybody needs to get the shipping piece like Amazon and the returns piece like Zappos, but also have a unique story to tell online because we're a digitally native brand and we're organic. And so you just have to, it feels like the room for error has gotten a lot smaller in terms of consumer expectations. And, we think we're up to meeting it, but it definitely requires a lot of work to continue thinking about how can you do every aspect of your business better.
Right. Especially when you're competing with other, e-commerce brands and behemoths like Amazon. But it is interesting you say that. I mean, even me, I just was telling Allison about this in our previous recording, but even me, I was a gung ho. I will never shop online. I like to try on. I'm going to forever be like a brick and mortar shopper. And then this year I ended up, buying a lot online. And then my biggest fear was, well, what if it doesn't fit? How do I return it? And I am seeing so many brands, so many companies offer different types of returns, whether it be like happy returns where you drop off at various locations and you literally just like scan it and put it into a bin or whatever it may be. It is really interesting how these kind of new things that we're seeing these innovative kind of strategies around shipping and returns for sure. Are you implementing anything entirely new? Like, are you trying, like, for example, are you trying a different type of return method or shipping method or anything like that this year?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Happy Returns. So we partner with them as well. We've been with them for probably 6 or 9 months now. And again, I just think the pace of change in e-commerce is so fast that, we didn't necessarily have the ability to see how things worked last holiday and wait to make changes until this holiday. So, we saw over the first 6 or 9 months of last year after COVID started, what consumer expectations were around returns. And we implemented Happy Returns in the first quarter of this year.
Wow.
And so that's the type of thing is like, I would say, historically, we've probably been more of a build type organization where if we see something, we feel like we have the capabilities to build it internally. But with the pace of change, I would say more recently, we've tried to identify partners like a Happy Returns who have a very specific component of our business that they do incredibly well and probably better than we can build. And so, and faster. And so we've started partnering with more outsource, technology partners that can help us try to deliver on all the various aspects that consumers are expecting us to nail.
Well, and I think that's such an important even lesson for any, business leader who's tuning in right now or really entrepreneur. I mean, you can only do what you can do, but don't fix what isn't broken. If there's somebody that does it, well, really, really well that you can partner with and that fits inherently in your business, then go, don't make your life a living hell, right? Go for it. So I think that's really interesting. What sort of data are you using to what sort of data did you use to make a decision like, oh, we're going to go with Happy Returns or to fix any of your shipping methods or what have you? What are you looking at as we head into this time of year?
I think we always start with the consumer. And so what do they want and how are we delivering on that? And so for something like returns, it's, how many customer contacts does our CS team have that are related to returns, or how many customer contacts on average does somebody returning a product with us have? And how can we make that more seamless? And so you look at, I think we start with the customer, look for friction points or places we can do better, try to address those. And then I'd be lying, but if I said anything else, but cost does matter for us. And I'm the CFO of our business. And so for me, it's specifically important. So we're always going to look at cost. We're going to look at the amount of time it's going to take to implement. And then really trying to understand kind of what the return on that investment is. And so, if we invest in a technology partner that costs $10,000, for example, how is that going to impact our consumers? Is it going to result in a higher average order value, or is it going to result in them being more likely to come back? And so we have a higher retention rate. And so really trying to understand what the long-term either revenue or cost implications are of an investment like that.
I love that you're talking about this because The role of the CFO and really finance and accounting teams has been evolving over the past couple of years, but that was expedited because of COVID. And we talk a lot at NetSuite about how the role of the CFO has become more heavily involved in these kind of big game-changing business decisions. And it's, hearing you even talk about this and how obviously costs and everything fits into the Pact's actual business strategy is really cool to hear, real life examples from, because we've talked to CPAs and we've talked to, kind of experts in the industry, but hearing it from a CFO and saying like, these are the decisions I'm involved in. It's like I said, it's cool to hear that from a real life perspective. From the e-commerce side, what you mentioned, you're putting some effort into your digital strategy. You are a digital brand. So what steps are you taking to draw more people to shop with you? And then how will you prepare for, larger volume of online orders should they come?
Yeah, I think the changes that we've seen in the digital environment over the past 18 months have been equally fast paced as anything else we've seen. And with a lot of brick and mortar retailers being forced to figure out digital, first of all, you have huge competition bidding for the same eyeballs. And so costs went up for that reason. And then more recently you have Apple's iOS change and the impact on Facebook. And so we're trying to navigate that. How do you efficiently and effectively target consumers who we think would like our products? And so that piece has been definitely one of the bigger challenges that we've tried to face. And so one thing you do is you look for new channels and you start testing into places that you might not have been before. And so whether that's podcast advertising or connected TV like Hulu, or, a lot of things are going, reverse. And so direct mail is becoming a big channel again with catalogs and postcards and things like that. And so you try to get more lines in the water, but do it in a way that's measured, where you can see, data-driven analyses that tell you this is working, this isn't. These are the type of ads that are working. And so really trying to find the places where you're going to push your chips in. And I think, for us historically, it was Facebook and Google, and now we've had to get a little bit more diverse as we look for the right place to go meet consumers.
Right. What channels are lucrative for you guys?
So we still see a lot of success in Facebook and Google. We've made big investments in direct mail recently. And then I think ones that are a little bit more higher funnel or podcasts, which we've tested into a little bit. But I would say our bigger bets right now are around direct mail.
Got it. And I know I keep asking this, sound like I'm beating a dead horse or a broken record, I should say. But then what data is informing this? What are you looking at to make sure, like when you are entering these new channels, podcasting, for example, to make sure that you are spending the correct amounts? As you just said, customer acquisition costs are increasing across the spectrum, especially after, the shift to online last year. So what data is kind of driving these decisions between where you're putting your money, how much money you're putting in different channels, and so on?
Yeah, the nice thing about these channels now is that it's pretty affordable to go test into them. So you don't have to be making $100,000 commitments to every channel you're going to test. You can get in for a little bit lower level and get some real learnings. And so we try as much as we can to get direct attribution from these channels. But if you run an ad on Facebook or send somebody a postcard or a catalog, or you run a podcast ad, you can't ever be 100% sure that a purchase that comes that doesn't look like it's associated with those didn't actually have some origin from one of those channels. And so, we spend a lot of time thinking about attribution, how we do that. You have to look at some, related data that may not be direct, but see if there are correlations that you can draw between, specific, like an example is podcast advertising. So you can do podcast advertising regionally. And so we're going to run a podcast ad in Texas, and no, we may not be able to see everybody that absolutely converts from there, but we can compare Texas to Oklahoma and see if there is a lift in Texas beyond what we saw in Oklahoma. And then you can infer that maybe some of that lift came from the podcast, even though some customers didn't use the discount that we offered in the ad. So
Mm-hmm.
the nice thing about most digital channels or e-commerce advertising channels is that you get a lot of information, a lot of data, and it may not be perfect, but you can typically triangulate to understand impact of specific tactics.
Yeah. Now, this kind of brings me to one of my final questions around, you guys are obviously heavily direct to consumer. And that's, that has an impact on the way that on your go-to-market strategy, and everything else that you're doing on the digital side. So for our listeners who are tuning in that are considering a D2C business model, how do they know if it's a good fit for their business? Like what research or data drove Pact to make that decision?
Yeah, I'd almost reframe it a little bit. And I would say you need to think about justifying whether you want to be a wholesale business, because direct is really, I think, the way of the future. I think having as much information on your consumers and really controlling that relationship, especially when we get into a place where the branded environment is getting a lot more crowded. There are a lot of people chasing the same consumers. I don't necessarily want to entrust a buyer at a department store to tell my brand story to those consumers and tell them why I'm different and why they should keep buying from me. And so I just think there's so much value to controlling the relationship with the consumers and being able to tailor your message to what they want and how they like to be spoken to in terms of channels and offers and things like that. And so I honestly think it's hard, and especially given the shift to e-commerce, I think it's hard to justify not being a digital business these days.
Yeah. I mean, and even beyond like retail, I just had a conversation with one of our other customers, Red Bay Coffee. They're based out of Oakland, California. And before COVID, they had some cafes, they had some coffee shops, and then they shipped their coffee, they distributed their coffee to different cafes and grocers. But now they have a booming D2C model and e-commerce platform. And I just think that's so interesting because I'm not an avid coffee drinker. So maybe this is just me, but like, I'm not really going to a coffee e-commerce site to buy my coffee. Like I'm going to find it in store, but they've seen, even that, like even where I wouldn't assume that would be, a profitable way to go. They're seeing huge increases in profits from that, which is very interesting.
Yeah. It's fascinating the type of, categories that are being flipped upside down by digital that you never expect. And, taking a coffee business that's gone from 5% to 15% online or e-commerce is a lot easier than growing a wholesale business that much. Wholesale has a fixed footprint by definition, and so there get to be caps, and you're at the mercy of somebody else's decision making. And so we just find that digital is powerful. I think for apparel, it's probably an easier category to do digitally versus food or beverage or something like that. But I think every company needs a significant component of digital, if nothing less, just to build stronger relationships.
Yeah. So if you could summarize it, what are the top benefits and the top challenges of a D2C business? Like if somebody, has been doing wholesale for a bit and is trying to break in, not likely, but if you had to summarize it for them, what would you say?
Yeah, so I'd say first and foremost is the relationship with consumers, direct relationship that we've talked about. That's powerful. It enables you to be much more targeted about how you talk to customers and what you show them. I think another big benefit is that it's just higher margin, that you're cutting out a middleman. And so there's a real financial impact of going direct. In terms of challenges, I think the digital environment is incredibly crowded, and you have to figure out a way to stand out and remain relevant. And I think consumers have so much more choice now than they did before. And we've seen a ton of stats about how loyalty for brands is just dropping off the table because, you're willing to try the new shoe brand that pops up into your Instagram feed. And that means you're not buying a pair of Nikes for a while. Right. And so I think consumers are becoming a little bit more finicky in how they choose brands, which is great for an upstart like us, where we want people to try us and give us a shot because we think we can deliver. And so, I think with the customer relationships, there are big expectations that come from that. And so you really have to deliver for consumers, and they've got a direct line back to us. And so we hear, if we don't do something right, we hear about it.
Right. Yeah. That's what my next question was going to be. So how has Pact overcome some of those challenges? How have you guys kind of made a voice and impact in such a crowded space?
Yeah, I think, I think everything for us starts with the consumer. And so we have a customer service team that works, we don't outsource it. Our customer service employees are full-time, and they have direct lines back to our head of product, to our head of digital marketing. To our CEO, to our ops groups, talk about how we're doing shipping and fulfillment. And so I think listening to consumers, they'll tell you, consumers aren't typically shy. They'll tell you what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And so, we think that having a frontline customer service team who's answering questions and hearing feedback, and then providing that as a resource back to the rest of the organization, gives us a real-time understanding of what we're doing right and what we're not. And that enables us to adapt pretty quickly. You can make such fast decisions in the digital environment in terms of how you're marketing a product. Like, is the naming confusing?
Right.
Are customers angry about the price? I think it's priced too high. Did they get something in a stitch popped, and you need to figure that out? So you just have real-time access to feedback from consumers that you're able to make the experience better for every consumer that comes after them.
That's great. Such great advice in here, Drew, not just for, planning around the holidays and what Pact is doing, but really just in kind of this D2C world in general, and how you guys are doing business. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Kendall, I appreciate you having me. It's been fun getting to chat.
If he said it once, he said it about 5 times during this episode. Cook says Pact's most important consideration is putting the consumer first. Meet them where they want to be and maintain transparent communication, not only during the holiday season and as you're navigating supply chain challenges, but always, especially when you're trying to go D2C. Thank you so much to Allison Auclair and Drew Cook for joining us on this episode. For more information, I've left a few links in the description of the episode, and I also want to shout out to our editing crew over at Lampstand and all of you for tuning in. As always, don't forget, rate, review, and subscribe.
You just listened to the NetSuite podcast. Be sure to tune in every week with more NetSuite developments, stories, and insights into the benefits of one integrated system to help you run your business.